Hey friends, Alicia here with Maker's Gonna Learn, and today we're gonna be making a doormat from one of these core doormats. Everyone loves these, and we've got a few tips and tricks up our sleeve that you all are gonna love to learn about today. Make sure to click the subscribe button and the little bell so you're notified every time we get crafty, and let's get right into the video. So the beauty in these projects is that it does not take a lot of supplies. You can see here I've got our Flex Seal spray paint. These are liquid rubber sealant coating, meaning that they're waterproof. So we love to use the Flex Seal in order to paint our doormats. That way they last a lot longer. And if you're wanting to do something beginner friendly, this is your first mat, I highly recommend just using a black Flex Seal to complete your project. The spray paint is really nice. You can also buy it in like the smaller tins and use a stippling brush, but the black Flex Seal spray paint is our go-to. So the main ingredient to create one of these beautiful mats is our Flex Seal spray. This is basically liquid rubber in a can. You've probably heard of this or seen it in your local Lowe's or Home Depot. Typically, we lean towards just the black Flex Seal, mainly because the color payout is so much better than white or any of the other colors that they offer. Now, the color selection is very limited when it comes to Flex Seal. That's why we try to keep it simple and just go for a black finish. And then you can always seal it with the Flex Seal Clear. Now, if you're creating a project where you're using multiple colors and you're using different kinds of paint, I highly recommend that you grab some of this Flex Seal Clear because this is gonna make sure everything is completely waterproof. And so you don't wanna take all that time to create your mat and then not be able to use it because it gets destroyed the second it rains. So this is really gonna help seal in any of those non-water resistant paints. Now let's talk about freezer paper. So if you go on the internet and you're looking on tutorials for how to do these mats, you're gonna run into a couple different ways. So a lot of people like to use just a permanent vinyl to kind of attach it, and they'll transfer it on using press and seal. Listen, that works for some people. We have tried that method many times. The freezer paper is always the go-to. The freezer paper, you apply heat to it, it adheres to the mat, it comes up easily. You don't have issues pulling a transfer sheet off or anything like that. It cuts well on the machine. So there's lots of perks to using this freezer paper, and typically we buy 150 square foot at a time, so this is like a pretty big roll. I will say, if you find some freezer paper at home and for some reason you're trying to adhere it to your mat and it's not sticking, it can go bad. So the freezer paper does have a shelf life. If you find it's not sticking, I highly recommend just purchasing a new roll. So if you feel like I don't need 150 square foot of freezer paper, don't buy a huge roll in case you plan to use it in the near future. You're also gonna need a heat source. The Cricut Mini Easy Press is our go-to because we can really get into the crevices of our design. So love the Cricut Mini Easy Press, and I'm gonna link all this stuff below so you all can snag it if you wanna get it today, and you can go ahead and start creating your own mat. I've also got just a standard measuring tape. I have a 24-inch light grip mat. Now you can create this project without a 24-inch mat, and I will show you in Design Space how to split your design up if that's something that you're wanting to do. I'm also gonna put a couple links in the description to some of our other doormat videos that you may be interested in, such as if you're wanting to use multiple colors and things like that, because today we're gonna keep it simple and just use that black Flex Seal to get a really strong, bold design. And then obviously you're gonna need one of these mats. So this is just your standard 18 by 30 core doormat. This is what we typically buy. I can get these at Walmart for $5. Hobby Lobby has them, but we only buy them when they're on sale. You can also get them at Home Depot, and I believe you can get them at Lowe's as well. Now that we've went over supplies, let's go ahead and jump into Design Space and decide what we wanna put on our doormat. So we're gonna be using two different fonts called Juliet and Simplicity. So I am on the Maker's Gonna Learn website. You can see right here, this beautiful Juliet font is gonna be perfect for our Taylor Swift inspired doormat. I'm just gonna hit download. It's gonna pop into a zip folder. We can open that and then double click that font type and hit install. All right, so the first thing that you're gonna wanna do once you get into Design Space is go ahead and open a basic shape. We're going to use the square. I'm gonna unlock this shape and let's change it to the size of our core doormat. So this is gonna be 30 by 18. Okay, it looks very big here, so let's zoom out. I'm gonna go ahead and change the color up here beside this operation drop-down menu to a light brown. Now that brown's a little dark, so you can select advanced and then move it until you get the right color. This step is not necessary, adding the color. You do want to have the square, but you can keep it whatever color you want. I just really like to see my design before I go to cut it out, so this helps me get a good visual. Now I'm gonna go to my text box over here on the left. We're gonna do some lyrics from the ever so famous Taylor Swift today. So I know we probably got lots of Taylor Swift fans watching. Hopefully you all love this doormat as much as we do. So let's go ahead and type out what we're wanting to put on our doormat. Now you can put whatever you want, get crazy with it, whatever fits your personality. That's the fun part of these mats, is making them custom to what you love. Okay, so I haven't actually chosen a font yet. I just wanted to get what I want on my design already onto the canvas. What I'm gonna do next is ungroup these to lines. So right now, both lines of text are in the same text box. Let's go to advanced and ungroup to lines. This is gonna give us two separate text boxes, and now I can change the fonts if I want. So I'm wanting to use two different fonts here. I'm thinking we'll do a pretty script for This Is Our House, and then something a little bit more clean cut for We Make the Rules. Okay, so this is the design that we're gonna go with. Now, there are a couple things that I need to fix. So the first thing that I'm noticing is over here in our layers panel, we've got these red exclamation point warnings saying it's not supported by the maker because the image is too big. So what I'm gonna wanna do is make sure that This Is Our House is under 23.5 inches wide. So let's select it and make it a little bit smaller, but I want it to be as big as it'll let me. So I'm gonna actually manually adjust that to 23.5, and then it makes it about that size. Then you can go in and adjust this proportionally if you're wanting to do that. I think this size is pretty cute. Now, for some reason you don't have a 24-inch mat, it's very simple to create this just using a 12-inch mat. So all you're gonna need to do, I'm just gonna pull this down here. I'm gonna actually duplicate this and set it to the side just so I don't have to redo it again. What I want to do is put our words on their own, on multiple lines of text, okay? So now I'm just hitting enter to do that. You can see these will almost fit on a 12-inch mat. Now this one is still a little bit too big, and we can double check that by getting a basic shape. We're gonna do 11.5 because if you're cutting on a 12 by 12 mat, you would think initially, oh, I need to make a 12-inch square. Well, no, because you can't cut a 12-inch width and height on a Cricut mat, not truly. It's really 11.5. So I'm gonna make 11.5-inch square. Let's go up here to operation, and we're gonna select guide. And you can see This Is Our House fits inside of there nicely. And then you can see this one fits in here nicely. So you're gonna have to cut it on two separate mats, which is totally fine. So now that we've got it the way that we want it, I can hide my brown square. Now, if you're just wanting to do this one, pay attention to this whenever we go over to the mat. If you're wanting to do it on 12-inch mats, I'm gonna keep these up here so you all can see how we do both of them when we go to the Make It screen. So before we go to Make It, I'm just gonna change the colors of these so they don't try to go all into the same mat. Let's just make this gold just for the sake of it standing out. And then I'm going to center these horizontally, and then I'm going to attach them so they stay exactly where they are. Next, we're gonna go to Make It, confirm, and then you can see here, this one went onto our 24-inch mat. It takes up the entire thing. And then this one down here, we can actually change this to a 12 by 12 mat. And lucky for us, they both fit on there. So that's really nice. We don't need to mirror it or anything like that. We're just gonna keep it as is. And then we're gonna select continue. Now, while that's loading, I'm gonna go ahead and get my mat ready with my freezer paper. So you're gonna wanna use a light grip mat that is relatively new, still sticky. If it's a really dirty mat, you're probably gonna want to make sure to clean it. I'm gonna go ahead and trim this the length of the mat. And you can see as I'm cutting it, it's kind of hitting the light because there is this waxy film on the back, and then this side is a little bit more matte. So when they're beside each other, you can really tell. Now this shiny side is the side that needs to go down. So you're gonna want to cut it on the more matte side. So what I'm gonna do is just turn this over, and I'm gonna line it up. We're gonna trim off all of that excess paper using a true control knife. And I'm gonna burnish this down really well to make sure it's very much not going to move. You also wanna avoid any bumps in the paper, otherwise it will not cut properly. So I'm just gonna fold this over and then trim it up really good. Back in design space, we are going to browse all materials. So we're gonna cut this on medium cardstock today and then hit done. And we're gonna do default pressure just using the fine point blade. And then we can go ahead and load this into our machine. Okay, while that cuts out, I'm just gonna lay some paper out to protect any part of the mat that I don't want paint on, as well as protect our table. You want to do this in a very well ventilated area because it is spray paint, so it's aerosol and there are fumes. So I'll have a piece at the top and a piece at the bottom. And then our words will go right through the middle. And if I need to cut other pieces to cover it, we can. And we can also tape it down. That way it's definitely not gonna get anything under where we've got paper laid down. So I'm gonna go ahead and turn my mini easy press on to the highest setting. And once that turns green, we can put our design onto our mat. Once you start removing the outer part of the stencil, make sure to be very careful because that is the part that we need. The letters that are inside, so this part we don't necessarily need, but we do need the middle of the E. So you want this big part and you want the centers of the letters. The actual word we don't need, okay? I'm gonna start by pulling off the bulk of this and then getting it onto my mat. I'm gonna leave all the centers to my letters on this mat. That way I know where they go and I can iron them on individually. So my design got a little bit butchered in some areas. I would probably do medium cardstock with less pressure, but really you need to kind of test your machine out and make sure that you've got the cut settings right because it's gonna vary from machine to machine. Now, if you're using a Maker series, there's an actual freezer paper cut setting. The Explore series does not have that. Typically medium cardstock works for me, but today I didn't have as much luck. But listen, we're gonna make it work. I've got an X-Acto knife or a true control knife, whatever you wanna call it here, ready to kind of fix the places where it may not have cut as well. So I'm just gonna do that. And I'm gonna pull off the bulk of this first and leave the middles of my letters on my mat. That way I can just snag them individually and apply them to my mat. And that'll make a little bit more sense here in just a second. Okay, so we're just gonna set all this to the side and we will be pulling from that here shortly. And then we're gonna go ahead and put this onto our mat. So you can trim off the excess. I like to leave a little bit around it just for the sake of preventing paint getting on my mat anywhere, but I'm gonna trim off all of this excess, mainly because I want to try to line this up in the center of my mat before I go spray painting it. This just gives me a better visualization of where I wanna put it. So the mat is 30 wide. We're gonna need to put it about at the 15 mark. So we're halfway through our design, and you can always just take this and crease it right where the halfway mark is. So I just fold it in half and crease it. And then I'm gonna line that crease mark up with the 15. And then if you want to get real specific, you can come over here to this 18-inch side, and you would want that 9-inch line going half all the way through here. And you can even double check this side and make sure it's pretty straight. I'm more of an eyeballer myself, but just for the sake of showing you all how this would be done, that is how I would do it. And you can use painter's tape to like mark off the central points if that helps you. But I'm gonna go ahead and just start ironing this on. You can also use painter's tape to secure this down so it kind of stays in one spot while you're ironing it. It's not the best tack, but it will stay once heat is applied to it. You just have to kind of take your time and work slowly and make sure you're getting all of the areas. So I like to kind of let it sit on an area for about 10 seconds, and then we can move on to the next area. Now I'm gonna take some tweezers and just plug in the middles of those letters, and then we're gonna press those down as well. And then I'm just going to iron the middles of those letters down the same way that we did before. This also gives a little bit extra adhesion for the parts that we already had went over. If you have a bigger press, like a bigger easy press, you could probably use that. I just really like using this mini easy press because I can put pressure exactly where I want it. And sometimes these paper flaps want to come up and I can just kind of adjust it. So that's just personal preference. But if you've got a bigger press, feel free to use that. So before we go into spray painting, I just want to make sure any corners that are still sticking up, I'm just going back over them to make sure they're down before we start spray painting, because I don't want any of that paint to get up under the stencil. And this will tack on. It doesn't have a great adhesion, but this is so much easier than trying to apply vinyl in my opinion. Feel free to try both ways. This is what works best for us. So I'm going to take that butcher's paper on the top and the bottom, and I'm just going to tape it so it's not moving at all. Then I have some freezer paper left over I'm going to use for the edges. Okay, so you can see everything is closed off that we are not wanting to get paint on, and then we just can see where our letters will go. Make sure you shake your Flex Seal up really, really well. I would do it for at least a solid minute, and then do a test spray on something that you're not going to be painting, which I just did. And then you're just going to pop that off, and then we're going to get to painting. So you can let that top layer soak in for just a minute, and then you can go back in and do a second and even a third coat until you're satisfied. And then once you've got it how you want it, you can go ahead and remove the stencil. And then I'm just taking some tweezers and pulling out the middle of these letters. And this is the final product. What do you all think? The only thing else that you could do, and this is only if you're using non-Flex Seal paint, is add a layer of that Flex Seal clear. Now we used Flex Seal black paint here, so we were fine. But if for some reason your store is out of the black and you just use a regular black, grab a Flex Seal clear. That way you can waterproof whatever paint that you have underneath it. All right, we finished. Hopefully, if you all were just completing this for the first time, you enjoyed this craft. It can be a little bit tedious, but the payoff is so good. I feel like it always turns out beautiful, and they're totally customizable. So you can make one for every holiday, every season, or whatever you would like. Make sure if you did not already subscribe, you hit the little subscribe button and the bell so you're notified every single time we post. And that free trial link for anyone who's wanting to join our membership and get access to these beautiful fonts and cut files to use on your Cricut machine. We've got that link below for you all. We would love to see you as a part of our community, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye, guys.